not mine. Here's my point. The welcome stamp serves every one of them, and it is the only tool we have that does so without asking a single Bajan to compete for a job. Think about what makes it different. Every other route to residence brings a person who needs a job. The welcome stamp brings the person and the job together. They arrive with their income already in hand, earned from clients and employers abroad, and they spend it in Barbados. So the question that rightly governs a work permit, could a Barbadian do this job, simply does not arise. There is no Barbadian post to protect because none is being taken. And look at who these people are. They are highly educated, they are skilled in exactly the digital fields that the Prime Minister says our 21st century workforce needs. That is the very demographic gap she described, and the welcome stamp fills it with people who pay their own way and who, by the standard of this bill's own schedules, can never become a charge on the public purse. Let me make that real with two people. Matt Hamilton came to Barbados from the UK on the welcome stamp in August 2021, coming up on 5 years ago. In that time, he has built leading-edge AI-powered tools for Bajans. YouGetInTrue.com tells you which local store stocks the product you need, saving hours of driving around and all the fuel and emissions that go with that. WeOutside246.com lists local entertainment events more completely and more currently than anything before it, a boon to promoters and tourism alike. His work earned an Innovation Award at the Barbados Labour Party's annual conference. He is, in the Prime Minister's phrase, a digital neighbour, not a digital nomad, passing on the very skills she wants Bajans to acquire. Each one teach one in the flesh. And yet, after almost 5 years of contribution, this bill offers Hamilton no defined way to stay. My second example shows that the program attracts talent from the Black diaspora as well. Ianola Aboyeji, to most who know him, is one of the most significant technology builders to come out of Africa in a generation. He has so far co-founded $2 billion companies, Andela, which has trained thousands of African software developers for global careers, and Flutterwave, Africa's leading payments company. And he is younger than my own son. Today, he runs a venture platform investing across emerging markets. He too came to Barbados on the welcome stamp, and he remains on it today. He is exactly the, quote, skills and investment that lift productivity, of which the Prime Minister spoke. But here's the catch. The bill as drafted gives a person like him no horizon beyond the next 12 months, no defined way to turn a year-by-year stay into a permanent stake. If we want people who bring capital and global networks to build their next billion-dollar company in Barbados, this bill has to give them a better pathway. The welcome stamp can be the front door. This bill decides whether there is a welcoming front parlor behind it. Last August, Minister Wilfred Abrams said on the floor of Parliament that the bill will attract valuable human capital and investment, promote innovation, and facilitate economic diversification, strengthening our nation's competitive edge in the global marketplace. The Minister is absolutely correct in identifying the objectives that a successful immigration bill needs to pursue. But comb through every clause and every word of the Immigration Bill 2026, and you will not find a single place where these objectives are given operational muscle. The Minister hopes for these outcomes, but hope is not a strategy. The welcome stamp is the missing strategy. It is a tested and proven strategy with examples like Aboyeji and Hamilton. I read in The Nation of your own deliberations so far, and it's clear that several of you have already seen this. Senator Malalou observed that if these people are good enough to live here and are contributing, they're not taking anyone's job, and perhaps there is a path that should be recognized. Dr. Springer said that those who have integrated and kept the law should, by all means, have the opportunity. And Justice Moore told you something very important. The draftsmen can write the welcome stamp into the schedule as soon as they receive instruction to do so. So the missing piece is not legal drafting, it is a policy decision. And this committee is where that policy recommendation must begin. My mission today is simple. As you weigh this bill against the objectives the government has set for it, recognize that it requires integration with the welcome stamp as part of a path to permanent residency to help operationalize those objectives. This is the question you must each ask yourselves. Are you willing to weaken the immigration bill by neglecting to integrate the Barbados welcome stamp? The most powerful and globally imitated immigration innovation that this country has ever produced. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And I will start where you ended off. The welcome stamp was indeed a very good initiative by this government. At a time during COVID, we discussed, and I heard you summarize some of the comments of the members, and I'm not going to get into what the members said because you have it there clearly. But what you said in terms of it is clear a policy decision. And while we are here as a committee, you must understand that policy decisions are indeed, we can recommend, but policy decisions are indeed made at a higher level by the Cabinet of Barbados, which is chaired by the Prime Minister of Barbados. And there is a line minister who has responsibility for initiating policy, who has also to come to this committee based on your informative presentation. So I will say to you, and while we will sit and we'll field questions the other members, I just wanted to make that clear, because it's not solely on this committee to announce policy. It is the duty of Cabinet and the Prime Minister and the Line Minister to determine where. I'll give you a chance. I will tell you when to turn on the mic. All right? So just take it easy, sir. It is the duty of the Cabinet and the Line Minister, after we have deliberated, and we have a lot more to hear. We had 21 submissions, and it's my duty to be as fair and as transparent as I ought to be and should be as chairman of this committee. So we agree that the welcome stamp indeed has played its part, but whether it will be a standalone or it will be incorporated into the bill, we can discuss. We heard you, and I am happy that you indeed put your views on it with respect to having it incorporated into the citizenship bill, into the immigration bill. But to say it will weaken the bill in its absence, I totally disagree with you. But I agree with some of the comments that you have made, but this is a very good piece of legislation that has been drafted, and indeed our aim is to make sure that it is as strong as it ought to be. And I welcome comments now from the other members before you come back in. So give the members a chance to speak. Minister Husband.
Yes, thank you very much. And I just wanted to start by giving appreciation to Mr. Thompson, who gave considerable thought leadership to the formation of the idea of the welcome stamp. And it is one of his babies, and therefore he's very passionate about its development, etc. And I would also want to say, however, that at our last meeting, I believe we would have indicated that the Attorney General's chambers should speak to the current legislation, because my reading of the legislation is it does not preclude the welcome stamper from coming into citizenship or coming into the Barbadian space. In other words, because you're a welcome stamper, you're not automatically excluded from using this bill to regularize your status in the country and become a citizen of Barbados. That is not my reading of the bill. And I believe that we had asked to have that point clarified. If that is indeed the case, there would not be a need to put in separate sections specifically for welcome stampers, because they are already accommodated as any person who wants to become a citizen of Barbados. This is the path. So that was where we had left the discussion last time. I want to thank you too for sharing some of the benefits and value that the welcome stampers have brought to Barbados. Indeed, it has been a source of richness to the country, and we do want to work more on expanding it, encouraging more persons to participate, and then finding meaningful ways of their services, their products, and so on to be integrated into the economic and social fabric of the country, because it can only enrich us to have people who can bring such value. So I appreciate the your defense and promotion of the welcome stamp, but I still stay by the fact that I think that how the bill is drafted, it does not preclude welcome stampers from using it to come on board, and we would welcome them for sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The other point that was made, Mr. Thompson, was whether we should include it in the fourth schedule, and that's where we're at right now. So all your recommendations we have factored in terms of what the welcome stamper has done for this country. Remote workers, I know you mentioned remote workers also, and indeed I want to hear from Mr. Malalu and the other members before I conclude on the matter, before I summarize on the matter. But over to you, Mr. Malalu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to start by thanking Mr. Thompson for his clear, both written and oral presentation today. And I think he knows, and I think the committee knows, that I endorse much of what he has said. My reading of the bill is different to Minister Husband's of it, because I do think that there is no pathway for the 12-month stamp people they have to change pathways. What I would like to say, though, on the welcome stamp side is the criteria to enter Barbados under the welcome stamp is one that starts out initially by saying you will not displace any Barbadian, and that is part of what goes throughout our immigration, our work permit side. So the question really becomes, having been here on a 12-month stamp, welcome stamp, for some period of time, at what point do you negate that criteria and say, okay, now we will grant you permanent residency or grant you some other route which does not have that criteria? Because that criteria then changes, because once you are granted that, you can then work and take someone's. So I think we have to recognize that. So it was done for the right reason. It was done at 12 months at a time. I would like to agree with you that I think that the renewal for 12 months at a time is a weakness of it, but that's a different issue. And what I would suggest is, and to the committee, and certainly what I would be suggesting, is that when that is added, I hope, to the fourth schedule, as Chairman has said, that perhaps there will be some other robust thought around it, that perhaps in the initial stages, 12 months, perhaps on your renewal, having spent 12 months here, and we've seen that in fact you've not taken the job, you have contributed significantly, that the renewal be for a longer period, perhaps 4 years, so that at the end of then the 5th year that you were here, then you would be added into the normal train towards the permanent residency, which then, of course, leads to citizenship. So it gives you a clear and direct way to do it. That certainly would be my suggestion. And the last thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, on it is that, you know, obviously when we extend this, and we are saying to the grandchildren of Barbadians, who may never have lived here at all, have not chosen Barbados, but are making a simple choice, that we have made that very easy for them. And I think that we should make it very easy, because as the Prime Minister has said, told us many times, we have citizens by birth and we have citizens by choice. And these 12-month stamp people maybe wanted to come citizens by choice. They want to choose Barbados, and I think we should give them a definitive path. So I thank the gentleman for his contributions, and with those few words, sir, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malalu, Senator Malalu. Mr. Walters. Okay, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand, of course, that policy is a prerogative of Cabinet, relevant minister, and the Prime Minister. What I'm looking for is the right recommendations from this joint committee, because I know the Prime Minister values them. To Minister Husbands, of course, the current legislation does not bar any welcome stamp applicants. However, it neglects to invite them. And I am not suggesting anything more than what the chairman has talked about in Schedule 4. Basically, the point system is a 21st century way of managing immigration, and the welcome stamp just needs to be integrated and acknowledged, because the whole point of the immigration bill is to help develop Barbados, and the welcome stamp is a muscle for national development that the bill cannot afford to ignore. To Mr. Malalu, I understand that the welcome stamp and how it works is a matter not before this committee. And I have confidence that you and others will make recommendations within the machinery of government to achieve that. What I believe we cannot lose the opportunity for at this moment is to give a very strong signal through the immigration bill by integrating the welcome stamp pathway, not as any sort of fast track, but simply acknowledgement of its value, its existence, its success, and the leverage we can use it for to achieve what the government has said are the objectives of this bill, the innovation. How else are you going to specifically attract innovation? How else are you going to specifically attract people like Mr. Aboyeji, who I was talking to because he's a gadfly about the world, but when he talks to me now, he talks about coming home. When he talks about coming home, he's talking about coming home to Barbados. Can we afford to miss such an opportunity? The Prime Minister, when she inaugurated this legislation back in 2020, it was the first of its kind in the world. 60-odd countries have copied us. It is time for us to take the lead again in immigration legislation. by making this acknowledged and part of our immigration policy and legislation. Thank you. You know I like words. I've written them down. I'll leave them with the clerk. And because I've also addressed the objections with regard to housing, with regard to all the other objections that members have voiced about this legislation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Thompson, for sharing with the committee. And indeed, in my preamble, I recognize the importance of what you did this morning to nation building, to our communities, and for future generation. We express the view as a committee that the welcome stampers should be facilitated. And the question is, how do we do it? Policy clarity is critical. And like we said earlier, two distinct questions have to be settled: whether the welcome stamper remain a standalone program or whether it should be used as a pathway to citizenship, and if so, on what conditions, before any provisions could be drafted. And like I said, that's a policy decision. But we indeed welcome your suggestions. We have endorsed most of what you said, and certainly before we end off this session, you'll be hearing from us. But I want to thank you on behalf of this committee. You have been one of the pioneers as well in ensuring that remote workers and welcome stampers indeed receive their true benefits to this country, nation building, to our communities, and to future generations. So again, I thank you for taking the time to come to present to this committee. And indeed, your words and your presentation have been endorsed by each and every one of us, and indeed by the public. So once again, I thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts from CPC? Any comments? Immigration?
Sir, all I would say on behalf of CPC, we are guided by policy. So there's nothing more we can add from this end.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, anything from you, Chief Immigration Officer, on this matter?
It's more of a comment. The Barbados Welcome Stamp came at a time when we had little or no economic activity. And as Peter said, it was the first. And I happened to be the person who was charged with operationalizing that. It made a lot of difference. Persons were excited, and from day one, persons were asking, how can I integrate into the Barbados economy? Most of them are persons with the skill sets that we desire, and they continue to ask, how can I become, to put it blunt, a Bajan?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next presenter. That will be Mr. Corey Greenidge, and he's from the organization, the Democratic Labour Party of Barbados. And we invite Mr. Corey Greenidge to make his oral presentation. Thank you, Mr. Greenidge. Let me welcome you on behalf of the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. I extend a warm welcome and sincere appreciation to you for taking time out, indeed, to be part of this process. The Immigration and Citizenship Bill that are indeed critical to nation building, to our communities, and indeed to future generations. You have 10 minutes in which to make your presentation. We are not hard and fast with 10 minutes. I know you're a man of many words, and you may go over, and we are not hard and fast here. This is indeed to get diverse views and comments, your lived experiences, to make these two bills fit for purpose as we move forward. So we are here. My role as chairman, I am not a chairman to make any, I can't make any pronouncements. As chairman, I can hear your views, and we deliberate, and thereafter we present a report to the minister, to the cabinet, and to Parliament. So over to you, Mr. Greenidge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the honorable members of the committee. I'm Corey Greenidge, and I appear on behalf of the Democratic Labour Party, who is obliged to have this opportunity to present to the committee. Mr. Chairman, at the onset, let me be abundantly clear. The Democratic Labour Party is not opposed to immigration reform. The Democratic Labour Party is not opposed to attracting investment to Barbados. We are not opposed to attracting skilled migrant workers, and we are certainly not opposed to measures designed to address demographic challenges or to strengthen Barbados's economic prosperity and competitiveness. And if we accept that Barbados faces legitimate concerns with respect to its demographics, we are therefore more concerned with a very more specific and targeted issue with the bills that are before this committee. Our concern is that the solutions that have been identified in these new bills do not actually address the problems. And on that basis, Mr. Chairman, I will make two very distinct submissions. The first submission is that the solution does not fit the problem. And on the backdrop of that, the second submission is that the question arises as to why Barbados then, in my own terms, would gamble with its international reputation. So the issue before this committee is not whether the government has identified a legitimate problem. The issue is whether the government has demonstrated that an accelerated access to citizenship is the appropriate response to meet the challenges. In our respectful view, they have not made that case. The Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, in his presentation at the second reading of the bill on the House of Parliament, he made what is essentially a relatively straightforward proposition. One, Barbados is experiencing demographic challenges and demographic decline. That demographic decline contributes to labor shortages, and the labor shortages threaten productivity, investment, and economic growth. What then is the proposition is that the solution to those problems that the minister has identified is a pathway to permanent residency and a contracted pathway to citizenship of Barbados. So in our review of the bills, we have tried to find evidence to support that there is a direct relationship between the accelerated access to citizenship and labor market challenges. We've tried to find evidence that this shortened pathway to citizenship would increase the labor force and increase labor force participation and improve productivity, and even help with underemployment, and we have not been able to find such evidence. Indeed, the labor market shows a picture that I believe is actually more complex than we have given credit for. So our official statistics point to relatively low unemployment. 6.1%, I believe, is the last figures that come from the central bank. But at the same time, there remains a widespread concern regarding, one, graduate underemployment, workforce participation, whereas you have many young people, mainly young men, also young women, who are just not participating in the labor force anymore and not looking for work anymore, and therefore they are not counted among that unemployment figure. And then the ability of young men who are coming out of university and young women unable to find employment commensurate with their skill sets and their graduation accreditation. So, significantly during the presentation, however, of the minister, he actually acknowledged, and I quote, that not all Barbadians who want work can find work. So the suggestion is that the challenge is not merely about labor shortage in that the number of people in the labor force. The challenge actually is more complex, and you have more complicated issues. So if we accept that there is a multi-layered approach to the labor force and the issues that Barbados is facing, the question that I want to pose to this committee is, why is citizenship reform, specifically, why is citizenship reform being offered as the solution? I want to submit to this committee that challenges in labor force and workforce challenges is nothing new. We've looked at case studies across the Western world and in industrialized countries who have experienced similar complicated labor shortages and labor force challenges. And they have employed very specific, sector-specific measures and policies to target those challenges without interfering with their citizenship protocols and citizenship regime. I point to Canada. Canada, who also face similar workforce challenges, developed what they call the provincial nominee programs targeted at very specific labor market regimes, and that was very successful. I am willing to offer the committee, the OECD has a 2019 report upon the PNP program in Canada, and offers a glowing report on its success in Canada to tackle the challenges of the labor challenges in Canada at that time, where the contribution of migrant workers moved from 7% within the Canadian economy to 35% by the time that report was given. And I'm willing to offer the committee the citation for that report by the OECD. Other case studies include Australia, similarly, face shortages in critical sectors and utilize occupation-based migration pathways linked directly to those specific shortages. Again, Mr. Chairman, New Zealand experienced similar pressures and connected its migrant approvals to demonstrate employer demand and workforce requirements. So their policy was specific to what employers were demanding, and they targeted those areas in order to formulate their migration policies. In each case, the government sought to solve labor market problems through labor market policies, specifically very targeted and specifically designed to tackle that problem. And in so doing, did not in effect change its citizenship protocols. I want to submit to this committee this morning that citizenship is not merely about immigration status. Citizenship of Barbados is not simply an economic incentive. Citizenship is an established, permanent legal, constitutional, and political relationship between an individual and the state. So once again, our submission is that the problem, yes, has been identified, and the evidence of the problem is there, but the government has not been able to show the linkage between that problem and the policy solution that they have offered in this bill. Mr. Chairman, my second submission this morning is that if the contracted pathway to citizenship does not, in fact, directly address the problems that have been identified, why then would we gamble with Barbados's reputation on the international stage? When the two bills are read together, this is the immigration bill and the citizenship bill, it is apparent, it's glaringly apparent, that it offers a very clear pathway to a very shortened form of citizenship in Barbados. It is done through the fourth schedule in the immigration bill, and then through the contracted requirements in the Citizenship Bill being 6 months within a 2-year period for CARICOM nationals and 9 months within a 3-year period for non-CARICOM nationals. The schedule, the fourth schedule attached to Section 7 of the Immigration Bill, offers a points-based system. And that points-based system is heavily weighted on financial resources and financial contribution, $5 million for more than half of the points required, which means that the permanent residency of Barbados is now directly tied to financial contribution in Barbados. And that in itself, even though this is not a citizenship by investment program, it is apparent that it is a program that links contracted citizenship requirement directly to a financial contribution and is heavily weighted on the financial contribution. It is undeniable. Compounded on that, Mr. Chairman, are the broad discretions that are given to the minister within the bill. And I do not have time to go into that, but that raises a lot of questions of transparency. It raises a lot of questions of accountability, where now you have these financial requirements within the bill, and the bill itself then gives broad discretion over to a minister within the immigration. Now, discretion within immigration policy is not unusual, but the combination of those two things then raises questions of accountability. I want to reference a case out of the Court of Justice of the European Union, where they addressed the citizenship regime of Malta. Now, I will repeat, there is no accusation that this is a citizenship by investment bill, but I believe the comments of the court can be instructive both to this committee and to the eventual policymakers, where the court specifically pointed out to the Maltese that the nationality should continue to represent meaningful attachment and sustained relationship of trust extending beyond the domestic borders. The court in that instance identified that this idea of a contracted period for citizenship cannot stand within the European law, because citizenship is something that should be established, that should have an established permanence within the borders of the country. This bill, Mr. Chairman, does not even have a requirement for a person to obtain permanent residence to be actually in Barbados for any sustained period of time. I'll say that again. There is no actual requirement in the bill to be in Barbados. In other words, a 40-year-old with a bachelor's degree with $5 million on the bank can obtain permanent residence in Barbados and then have a shortened pathway to citizenship. So this policy then moves from attachment, connection to the country, contribution to the country, to a mere points-based system where permanent residency can be obtained. In the interest of time, I just want to conclude, Mr. Chairman, that, and I've outlined very specific recommendations within our written submission, so I will not take the time to go through those. But I will say that it is our position that these two bills should not be advanced or should not pass the Houses of Parliament in their present form. We accept that Barbados faces demographic challenges. We accept that there are labor market pressures that exist. We accept that the government is entitled to pursue policies designed to strengthen economic competitiveness. But what we do not accept is that the government has demonstrated that the accelerated access to citizenship is the answer to solve those challenges. This burden, Mr. Chairman, has not been discharged. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to present.
I thank you, Mr. Greenidge. I'm now going to open the floor to the members to comment. But I just want to say one thing. This bill is in nowhere, and I heard you mention how we are gambling with Barbados' reputation. And I want to strike that off the record, because in nowhere what we're doing here, and my preamble was clear. I said we welcome you here, and we are here to take recommendations, your lived experience, to strengthen these bills. And what is before us in nowhere, I can say, looking at the report that we have before us, the Barbados Population Policy Report, I know you're privy to that, and some of the challenges you highlight, some of the challenges that we face. And I don't see anything that we're doing here today is gambling with Barbados's reputation. So I really would want to strike that off the record today. Through you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am minded of the language that I've used, but I do not withdraw the language, and I say that because it is clear in recent times that the international community takes immigration policy and citizenship policy very seriously. You have actions by the European Union, you have actions by the UK government and the Canadian government in recent times against small states, against small island states, and against some of our CARICOM neighbors, where visa access has been restricted and in some cases revoked. By highlighting the reputation of Barbados, Barbados's passport ranks highest in the Caribbean and among its neighbors, and very high within the world ranking. So there is a reputational risk here, Mr. Chairman. If the international community views us from moving from a regime that requires that a person have permanent residence in Barbados for 12 months preceding its application, and demonstrating that they have been in Barbados for 5 years within the preceding 7 years before that 7 months, that is a total of 8 years, and that Barbados now proposes to move to 6 months within a 2-year period and 9 months within a 3-year period, that is a gamble. Because insofar as I am sitting here, and I can recognize that such a gargantuan change to policy could have an effect, I guarantee you, Mr. Chairman, that there are persons across the international community that will take note of that change, and that change has a reputational risk. So, Mr. Chairman, I am obliged to your comments, but I do not withdraw my comments.
I heard you, and while I'm not here to get into any debate, that's not my role. My role is to facilitate this morning. And again, I want to thank you, but I just want to say to you that we've seen over years various administrations, high net worth individuals come to this country, and within 6 months, they've achieved a number of things, including citizenship, both administrations. And I would want to, well, not citizenship, but permanent residence in that form, high net worth individual, in less than 2 years. And I would want to say to you that with technology and what we have before us in the world, that 2 years to do due diligence is by no means a short period. It's a very long period. We do due diligence on several persons coming into this country. When I say we, both administrations over the years, within a 3 months period, a 6 months period, to determine their credibility or whether they can indeed practice whatever, whether law, set up companies, do business in this country. I just want to say that to you. This is not a first, but we have seen a number of incidents in this country where persons have been given the green light to practice in this country, and due diligence was done within less than 6 months. But I understand what you're saying, and I will open the floor to the members of the committee to indeed comment, because this is a discussion we'll have. And at the end of the day, there's no decision that will be made here today, Mr. Greenidge. So I welcome your, I don't want to say forthrightness, but I welcome your presentation. Indeed, you've presented a booklet to us, food for thought that we will review. We have started to review. We have gone through, we have summarized, and certainly we'll get back to you for sure. But the floor is open, and comments will come from the members of of the committee, and of course CPC and Chief Immigration Officers here to clarify anything that I have said or that you have said, and to further put this bill on the path that is intended to be, to serve the nation, our communities, and future generations. So over to you, Minister Husband.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to the committee. And I have listened with intent to hear what it is are the main concerns that you've presented. And I just want to start by saying, I believe one of the first statements you made was that in reviewing the bills that no evidence was produced to demonstrate how these bills would lead to an increase in the labor force and an increase in productivity. I just wanted to clarify for you that in a bill, the bill usually does not carry the policy reasons or the objectives in terms of why they are doing it. Rather, it will state what it is it wants to achieve. And in looking at the issue of population for Barbados, it is not only a labor force argument, it is also the fact that we now need stable current families who will become a part of the Barbadian space, because we are experiencing a lower birth rate. It is affecting us at the level of the population in our schools, which will then have eventual impacts on labor force and labor force productivity, but also has impacts for things like your government revenue, your capacity to preserve your social services. It has tremendous implications for your national insurance scheme. Our national insurance scheme, where we're at right now, our national insurance scheme needs 7 working persons in order to support 1 elderly person. The shrinkage in our population and the reduction in our youth has now led us to a place where we now have, for every 1 elderly person that we have to support, we only have 2 working people. That's the reason for urgency. What it will mean for Barbados is that your national insurance scheme, we'll have to keep looking at different ways to keep increasing it, to allow it to be able to take care of Barbadians as all of us continue to age. And that has implications for every one of us. The other concern that you raised was the issue of gambling with the reputation of our passport. And I could appreciate that there may be some people who would have concerns about this. But let me assure you that as a government, when we sat and looked at this issue, we recognized that one of the things we did not want to do was to go the way of the other countries that went for citizenship by investment. Because when you become indiscriminate in the issuance of that passport without doing all the background checks, making sure of the person's reputation and so on, you can dilute and put at risk your passport value. Barbados has carefully avoided that. And how have we done that? One, while finances are a part of the assessment of your suitability to come to Barbados, because at the end of the day, we wish to avoid situations where people come and then have to be reliant on the government purse. So they're seeking to avoid that. Now, I noted that you raised the questions concerning what other countries have done, but other countries are dealing with a different problem, and let me explain what I mean. When England and Canada and United States and so on are drafting their laws for population and citizenship and immigration, it is against the background of having boatloads of people coming in. It's against a background of hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border through Mexico into the United States. It's about people coming in on one pretext and then staying. It's about people saying that they're requesting asylum. The very attractiveness of their jurisdictions makes it an absolute magnet for everybody to want to go there. And that includes people who have money and people who don't have money. Barbados's problem is different. We do not have boatloads of people coming. We don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of people crossing the border. What we have is a situation where we want to deliberately craft an immigration and citizenship regime that will attract the type of person that we would want to have become a part of our family here in Barbados. So the question is, how do you do this? The question is, what's the profile of that person that you wish to be able to attract? One of the things that we have recognized, and we just had the dialogue on the welcome stampers, we recognize that we want to be able to attract people who have skills, who have resources, who can lend value to the Barbadian experience, who can strengthen it. We also want people within a certain working age. We do welcome people who are older. We don't exclude them, but we do want to attract the working population, not only to join the labor force, but to begin to produce children and have families that can help to swell the population of Barbados. Barbados has 269,000 people. Singapore, that is a little tip bigger than we are, has well over 1 million people who live there. It makes a difference to how wealthy and well-regulated the nation is because of its numbers. In other words, when Singapore is building an airport, when it's building a hospital, they are drawing from a tax base that is contributed to by well over 1 million people. When Barbados has to do the same thing, we're only drawing from 269,000 people. The longer you keep your numbers low, the more expensive it is for each individual citizen to contribute to the social services and the demands for the development of the country. And therefore, it means that Barbados not only has to find a solid way to approach growing its population, it also has to begin to do it at speed. And speed means that if you are now at a place where you only have 2 working people to support 1 working person, and that is going to get worse as more of us move into the senior age group, then time is not on your side. But I understand the concern that if you move at speed, are you putting at risk what you're doing because you may cause people to wonder, are you properly vetting people? Now, in the days when people used to use 5 to 7 years as the length of time to be able to become a citizen, etc., that kind of care was important because when people came, an immigration officer primarily only had that interview as they sat there to make a determination about a person. And if they wanted more information, it was absolutely necessary to get in touch with the entities overseas, to ask them, do you have any information on this particular person that would be of concern to us? They have applied to us for citizenship. That process could often take a very long time because in those early years, the technology was not there. What we have now that allows us to move faster but safely is access to databases which are part of an agreement, and I'm sure that the Chief Immigration Officer can speak to this, that allows you to make the necessary searches to give you the opportunity to evaluate whether or not this person is suited to become a citizen of your country. Now, some things may be hidden. Some people, because of the level at which they operate and the dark realms in which they operate, it may become difficult to get all of the information. So going to the issue of the discretion of the minister, the reason why he is given the discretion to withhold that citizenship is that where there is a gray area and it has not been easy to resolve, to get a definitive position, but you have reason to feel concerned that he has the power to say, we will not grant citizenship to this particular person because they may want or need more time, or their concerns have not been assuaged in terms of what they've been told about the person, and they do not want to take a chance. Now, that comes under your national security realm. If you do not allow the minister to have that discretion, then the person can challenge the refusal and say, you've not presented sufficient evidence to show that I am not a suitable person to become a member of your country, and you are discriminating against me, and therefore he could take it to court. So the way to safeguard against someone that you're not absolutely sure, you have some concerns, to ensure that you don't allow through the net someone that could turn out to be an issue, the minister has to retain the capacity to be able to make that determination at his discretion. Now, it does not mean he will lie on his pillow at night and make the decision. He's going to relate to the immigration officer. He's going to relate to the other security persons in the Security Council. They're going to look at the matter and examine it. And if they do not have the comfort that this person is suitable and free and clear, the power is given then to the minister on that basis to make the refusal, whereby it does not give the person an opportunity to go to a court of law and have it overturned in that way. The other thing that I just wanted to say, I don't want people to feel that everybody who has money is automatically a criminal and therefore not suitable to be a citizen of Barbados. That does not automatically mean that the person is persona non grata. All it means is that once we do the investigations and we are satisfied that this person meets the criteria, is a person who is desirable to become a citizen, that we will be able to welcome them. And if they have resources, those resources are important for Barbados. We have a number of people who I'm going to end here now for you, Chair, that we call Friends of Barbados. Barbados has always attracted a significant number of very high net worth persons who live here, buy property, stay here, come every year for a few months of the year, etc. But they feel like Barbadians. When we had COVID, those are some of the persons who stepped up to provide this country with the resources that were absolutely needed to keep our families afloat, because Barbados was, for them, their home, a part of who they are. And making it possible and attractive for them to want to become not just permanent residents, but to eventually become citizens of Barbados is actually a very good thing. Because the other thing that those persons do, because of their network of relationships in their home countries and the level at which they operate, many of them have been able to make a case for Barbados with their governments and other significant powerhouses on behalf of Barbados, because there may be an issue that we are grappling with internationally, and you need to pull on those persons to help us engage. So I hope that I have assisted you in understanding better what are some of the underlying reasons why, and what are the precautions that we take to try to ensure that what we've put here does not put us at risk of bringing into the country people who've not been properly vetted and that we feel assured can add to Barbados and will not put us at risk. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister Husbands. I open the floor to the other members of the committee. Senator Malolo.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start off by addressing Mr. Green and thank him very much for his presentation. Many of the points you've made, I share with you. I do not agree with you on one point, which is I did not see the nexus that the main reason for the citizenship bill was such as to solve the labour shortage. I will disassociate myself. I didn't see that nexus, but most everything else I share in some of your concerns. And one, through you, Chair, at some point I would like to get cleared up, and I think Minister Husbands addressed it there as well, is that I was not aware that we were creating a pathway that anyone could have a pathway to citizenship in Barbados without meeting some form of residency criteria being here. But I would put that as a question eventually to the Chief Immigration Officer to make clarity for me. What concerns me, I guess, in hearing what the gentleman said is that sometimes we have to take a step back and we have to look at these things. And chances are, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it may well be a duck. Okay, so when you have these situations where you can make a investment and you don't have to be here, but you have a pathway that we did not intend. I already said, Mr. Chair, in the previous meeting that I am concerned about the unintended consequences of some of these pathways that we're creating. So I just want to go back and with last word, say I agree with what you've said with regards to the pathway to citizenship. I think that we have to be very, very protective of our passport, and it's not about what we think about our passport, it's what others think about our passport. And I would steer the committee to a news story out of Ireland just on June 12th, a few days ago, where now St. Kitts has been, because of their CBI program, now have to have full visas in order to enter Ireland, not an ETA as we do. That's probably the start of the first domino to fall, because that will get extended to the entire Schengen region. And as a person who lives in Barbados and only has a Barbados passport, has no other passport, the access to Europe through that Schengen visa is essential for us, and how we can never put that at risk. So I am concerned, as I say to you, Mr. Chairman, I am concerned that we do not create something that we may describe it as different, but when you look at it from the outside, it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it sounds like a duck. And therefore, really and truly, it is another pathway to a citizenship by investment program through a different name. Thank you, sir.
Minister Springer.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Greenidge, firstly, I debated in my mind to say this, but I really did enjoy listening to your presentation. You made some points, and they were raised mostly by Minister Husbands, and in part too by Senator Malolo. But I too want to raise the issue of the shortened time, the compressed time, as you framed it, for citizenship. And my question is simple. I mean, we're living in the 21st century. We're living in the year 2026, where, for the most part, things are done instantly. That's become a standard across the world. And the technology now exists, whether it be AI or any other form of technology, to vet persons, to assess things, to monitor things, with far more efficiency than what would have existed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I suspect that living in these times, that we should have the technology that allows us to vet persons, to monitor persons, to assess persons in such a short time, that long period of time that was required in the past would no longer be required. I mean, the things that used to take days and weeks and months through AI can now be done in seconds, in minutes. And that exists right across the board. Why shouldn't that something similar to that? Not that we want persons being assessed in a day or 2 days, but why can't we have a reduced period of time for persons having that pathway to citizenship, and still at the same time have the same levels of efficiency in terms of the vetting of those persons, because of the technology now available to the authorities here, and even in the host country and the country from which they're coming from. I remember some time ago when we were launching Uber, a lady stopped me on my way to the meeting, and she told me that we shouldn't sign on to Uber because the government, the American government, would just have or capture our information. And I smile because, to my mind, it's just paranoia. They're just paranoid because, in actual fact, I had signed on to Uber years before when I traveled to the States. So there was nothing new about signing on to Uber here in Barbados, but people were so paranoid that this information now is out there that they thought that when this system came, that the American government for the first time would now have access to our information through an app that most Bajans who travel would have already logged on to a long time ago. So I suspect there's that level also of fear, nervousness, and concern that would have a person believe that a person has to be here for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years before you know enough about them to believe in your mind that that person is safe to have access to a Barbadian passport or Barbadian citizenship. I just don't share that view in this technological, digital age. That's basically my thing. One of the things you said that I think were addressed by Minister Husband, so I wouldn't go into them. Certainly matters of national security are of major concern. There are things that you may know about a person. You may not want the entire, this is speaking from the perspective of the minister, the entire country to know because of national security matters. I look at the incident that occurred recently here in the United States where a referee from a nation, from a country was banned from the United States, and persons were never really given a reason. But during the interview, it was said that the person was engaging directly with what they refer to as bad actors. You do not know who or what persons are engaging to. They wouldn't share that information, but they obviously had information that was relevant and important enough that they made a decision based on that information, but that information was never shared with the public. We will have our views and our perspectives, but they know why they did what they did. So I just use that as an example to say as to why the minister would not have to give a reason for rejecting or for not approving someone's citizenship because of that very same reason, national security. Thank you.
Senator Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to my comrade, Mr. Greenidge. I just wanted to follow up on one particular point. I think Corey raised two broad areas, which is targeted labor shortages and then the reputational damage of the passport, or likely damage to the reputation of our passport. And I raised the question of the labor shortages on the last session as reflected in the minutes, because a lot of what the government is saying is premised on workers. The minister today alluded to the National Insurance Scheme and the contribution to those schemes on the National Insurance Service. But we discussed last time the possibility of actually seeing some data on where these shortages exist. I think you agreed, Minister, that you will provide the committee with some data so that we can start to analyze to see where we are in terms of skill shortages and labor shortages outside of construction, because we know construction, everyone's been hammering that. But I think it is really essential that Barbados gets an idea, and this committee obviously making decisions and recommendations, and with the presentation of Mr. Greenidge today talking about targeting those labor shortages and going about replenishing our labor force in a different way rather than using the immigration policy, that we need to have some level of data so that we can make some more informed decisions and inputs to this committee.
You're going to?
Yeah, just let me apologize for not bringing that to you. We would have had a study done by the university on that, and the Ministry of Labour would also have some information. So I'll try to undertake to make sure you get it in time for the next meeting. I want to say, though, that when countries are making determinations about whether or not you are careless with your passport or not, it is not based on hearsay, and it's not based on the length of time you take to admit someone into citizenship. Because you have databases that helps you to identify people who are suspect, what would happen is that the immigration authorities, etc., would be monitoring if you're allowing people to gain citizenship or residency in your jurisdiction when they're flagged internationally. That's what they'll look at. In a view, I feel unsafe, I ain't sure if they're doing the right thing. They will be looking at the evidence of what you are actually doing, because they monitor the movements of people who are suspect. I share this because it's important for you to have confidence that the databases that we have access to allows us to see persons who are flagged, and that we ensure through the immigration office that persons are not allowed entry once they are flagged. So I don't know if the Chief Immigration Officer would want to speak to that, but that is the assurance that we can give the public, that we are not distributing passports willy-nilly to whosoever put their hand up to come. That has never been the case. The criteria is not only financial. What we're doing is we're seeking to make sure that we safeguard a passport that has tremendous international value, and to ensure that we do not risk it in a risky gamble. Well, every person with money is not necessarily a bad person that you should not let in. Once you do the due diligence and you operate under the due diligence, people should have confidence that whoever has been admitted to Barbados has been properly vetted. And again, as I said, where we are uncertain, the minister has the power to say, we're not certain about this person, we can't get any more information, seems to be a lot of things that are hidden, I am withholding permanent residence or citizenship to this person. But I think the Chief Immigration Officer can help us technically even better.
We start this hour in Florida, where a school board...
Sorry. Let me say this, on the CARICOM, sorry, my name is Margaret Hennis, Chief Immigration Officer. Under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and I just want to share a story. One of the main things we wanted was to have a skills pool set, and we did for a while, and then it dwindled. And in that dwindling, we no longer had those skill sets to build some of the things that we built. From a construction perspective, that pool set allowed us to build Sandy Lane, refurbish Sandy Lane, and a number of other places. When we started with the Hilton, then we had to diversify in terms of skill sets because they were no longer coming from the region. We saw that Guyanese, they went back home. We then had to find a new source in terms of giving us the skill sets that we needed. And we continue to evolve, and we continue to have people coming here. And I'm just sharing my observations after 46 years. And we continue to realize that because you didn't have the skill sets here in Barbados and you didn't have them in the region, therefore persons had to reach outside of Barbados then to bring persons in. That's one thing. Another is this. Many years ago, persons were asked to submit, along with the application, a police certificate of character. And that took a long time, you could imagine, for persons who studied in India or some places where it was difficult to get a police certificate of character. And so I think it was in 2018 that was removed. And Barbados we did our own vetting. We asked the question, the risk. What's the risk? We have not seen any greater risk of having our own vetting than we saw when persons had to bring their police certificate of character. What we saw was greater efficiency because it held applications back long. Barbados was then seen as a place that if you apply for a status, you had to wait long because the police certificate of character was something that kept persons back. So I want to share those two experiences to show that as we navigate, as we continue to evolve, there are decisions and policy decisions made that we, as the persons, the technocrats, we've observed that there were in the best interest of the country evolving and moving forward and being very competitive, because now we have chartered timelines. And in our chartered timelines, applications are processed. For example, citizenship, which many years ago took a good few years to process. But now you can get back your application in less than six weeks. And if we go on to make further points in terms of risk assessment, we do a very good job. When I say we, the immigration departments, with our security relationships in building out, we check and double check to ensure that the persons that we really and truly want to be here as good citizens that they are here. Let me make another point though. I was saying earlier that you got to look at the risk factor. If you apply for citizenship by virtue of marriage, you can get permission to reside for 3 years. After that 3-year period, you can get your citizenship. So a question of 3 years to get citizenship. Then you determine, is that person that I got married to a good person or a bad person, but they still have citizenship within 3 years? I rest my case.
Let's hear from Senator Waters first, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, even before the Chief Immigration Officer came in, I just wanted to clarify or just put on the record that the integrity of the systems or the security systems of the Immigration Department is not we're not attacking that and not questioning that. We're not questioning the use of technology in terms of determining if somebody is safe to enter Barbados or should be sent back at the airport or should not get citizenship or not. What we're saying is that you have a position where you're replenishing your labor force. You want workers because you're talking about productivity, you're talking about 7 persons, working persons to pay for 1 person's pension. So you're talking about persons that are going to come to Barbados and productive. Are there other ways that we can help replenish our workforce, even outside of Barbados, without interfering with our immigration policy at this level? In other words, we're moving from very a relaxed time to a very, fast time. So the concern is, are there other things that the government has to do with existing law, existing relationship with CARICOM, and even existing relationship with business people? Because we are sure that, for example, if everybody uses the construction sector, we know now that workers are coming from outside of CARICOM. But it is already happening. Do they need to be citizens if they stay in Barbados and work on multiple projects? Are they contributing to national insurance scheme as it is? So there are other things that we can do or that the government can do in other relationships and other laws that could help us get where we want as well. So the idea, and I raised it last time, what disadvantage will Barbados be in if we were not as aggressive as we intend to be with this legislation? If we went down to 4 years, if we went down to 5 years, if we went, as opposed to going down to the shorter periods that we're now discussing, what disadvantage will Barbados be in, knowing full well that the biggest threat, as I said today, and agreed with Mr. Malu, who is well versed in these things, is that the reputation of our passport is what, the perception of that is what would be at risk, especially given the fact that the point system also bears in mind the amount of investment a person brings to the country as well. Right? So it's just those sort of contexts. So it's not substantially an attack on the immigration department and the security systems and using technology to find out if someone is at risk or not. It is the broader points that we're trying to get home here.
Yeah, but just three things quickly. Let us not assume that everybody who comes here to work on a construction job or whatever intends to stay. Some people come because they want to get back home to their families, they want to get back to their culture. So don't make the assumption that everybody who comes is that way. Barbados had to adopt allowing foreign labor to come in for this reason. When a hotel team is making the determination as to where to establish a hotel, they look at many different geographical spaces and opportunities. They weigh up the facilities, the utilities, the ease of doing business, a whole set of things they evaluate, and then they narrow down to a handful of locations that they say, okay, we can establish this hotel in any of these four geographical locations. They meet our needs, we're good. When they then seek to come and want to get started and do more detailed investigation and discover that you don't have the labor to help them build it, and it's going to take you 2 years to build up your construction workers, they don't have that time to wait. They will very quickly shift from your location to the next relevant suitable location. So you would actually lose the investment. So Barbados had to weigh, should we hold the investment, we lose some of the construction work, but we will gain the hotel work. But in the interim, what we did was that we started the construction gateway and the hospitality gateway to fast track building up the skills so that subsequent investments, we will have the people. So that is why that would have occurred. The other thing that you raised was, you said that you don't have a concern with the processes and systems used by the immigration. You don't see that as a problem. If that is the case, then there is no problem.
Correct.
Because the only problem that you could have is that by giving short time, you're letting in all kinds of people in here that will put us at risk. That questions their process. The important thing to note is the change that has taken place internationally. And it is this: technology now allows us to do things much faster. Once we are assured that this is a suitable person, what is it that you think Barbados would gain by simply elongating the process? I already outlined that countries are not evaluating on perceptions and feelings and so on about whether or not Barbados is rigorous about how they handle their passport. They deal with data and information. And when they see something that says, you all are allowing all kinds of questionable people to be holding your passport, you're not as rigorous as you need to be, we are not allowing people with your passport to come in. It is not based on a feeling. It's not based on, hey, wait, they changed their laws, you know, somebody must be letting in a lot of criminals in there, let me shut them out. It does not work that way. they have access to the databases that the other countries have access to, and they will know if we've been letting in people that are questionable, and then they will put a break on, you know something, Barbados treading dangerously. You can be assured, and we have every confidence in our immigration officers, that they are doing a good and efficient job, and with the help of technology to help us identify suitable persons to join our Barbadian family without putting at risk that passport. We are determined on that because we know how important it is to be able to hold a passport that is acceptable across the world. This is only 166 square miles. We have to do business, we have to travel, we have to engage, and so our passport is valuable. We're not playing fast and loose with this, and we're not playing fast and loose with it for money purposes. What we're going after is quality persons to join us in our country to help build it out. And I want you all to have that confidence that that is where we are coming from. Yeah.
Can I hear from Senator Tamale?
Thank you, Chair. Just a reaction, first of all, to the Minister's comment, and then I would like through you to place a question to the Chief Immigration Officer. First of all, I would like to react to the Minister by saying that the European Commission on this, I was looking at this matter, who singled out the 5 Caribbean CBI states and removed them from the visa-free access. They gave 3 reasons for doing that. The 3 reasons that they gave was, 1, citing the scale of the passport issuance, how broad it was, how it was available to so many, a broad number of people. They cited the short processing times, which gets to the point of how long does it take for you to process, vet, and how long before you're eligible. And thirdly, they talked about the low rejection rates. Now, while I think you and I and most people would recognize that probably something had to happen to flag this, which is they probably had to have some bad actors that got through that made them look at it, but still, what this has come, as I said earlier, it has come to their attention, and they're looking at anyone who has a citizenship program, and they're going to look at those 3 criteria and what it is. And I'm encouraging us to be mindful and recognize that the world is reacting to these economic citizenship type of things, and we should make sure that we consider that in whatever we do in our new republic in changing our pathways to citizenship here, that we take that into consideration. That's the first point. The second thing was just a question, and I don't want to leave this without having given the Chief Immigration Officer the opportunity to respond, because I understood the gentleman to say in his submission, and maybe I misunderstood him, was that there is a pathway now that is being created by this bill, a pathway to citizenship that does not require physical presence. I have not been able to see that, and maybe I misunderstood the gentleman when he said it, but he did say that. He's nodding his head. So could the Chief Immigration Officer, through you, sir, tell me whether or not that such does exist?
First, let's clarify what he said.
Okay.
So I'll give Mr. Greenidge the floor first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did say that the bill that it is, as it is currently drafted, does not have a requirement for the person to be in Barbados. It may be an oversight because the current immigration bill does. You have to be here. But all the bill does, if you go, well, you may not have the bill before you, but if you go to section, I believe, 7 of the immigration bill, it just speaks and points you to the 4th schedule, which is a point system. There is nothing in the 4th schedule that requires a person to be in Barbados for any particular length of time. It says that permanent residency is gained by 10 points, full stop. And those 10 points can be gained, and you see how the schedule is laid out. So in our existing law, there's a residency requirement to get permanent residency, but as the bill is now drafted, it does not have a specific time by which the person has to be in Barbados.
We'll allow the CPC as well as the Chief Immigration Officer to speak. And yes, Mr. Greenidge,
Yeah.
we have the bill before us in the chair.
I'm looking at the citizenship bill with a date of the 21st of April, and I'm looking at clause 3, acquisition of citizenship, and at 5, in 3.5 says, subject to section 4, the following persons may apply to the minister in the prescribed form and on payment of the prescribed fee to be registered as citizens of Barbados. And they said, a person who is a national of a member state by birth, descent, or naturalization, the spouse of a person, the dependents of a person, if they satisfy the minister that they have lawfully resided in Barbados as permanent residents of Barbados for an aggregate of at least 180 days during the period of at least 730 days immediately preceding the data application. So that, in my mind, address the concern raised by you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Now, my concern is not, you're correct. Remember, you have to stitch these two bills together. The immigration bill does not have any requirement to be here to obtain permanent residence. So that's the citizenship bill. So the citizenship bill says you have to be in Barbados for the 6 months once you have attained the permanent residency. So imagine that you are now in a situation where you have given person permanent residency. The term alone is defeated if the person does not reside in Barbados. So I am familiar with the requirement to obtain the citizenship, but my comment was specifically targeted to the immigration bill, where you can obtain permanent residency without being in Barbados.
Through you, Chair, thank you, Mike, but it has been clarified for me that there is no route to citizenship without residency first in Barbados. There is no route. That is, so I think, sir, I may have misunderstood you or you may have misspoken, but it's the route to citizenship. Clearly, you cannot reside in Barbados until we have, as a country, decided that you can first live here. You can visit here, but there is we first have to make a determination if you can live here permanently through one of these methods. So I just wanted to make clear. I withdraw the questions, no need to answer it. There is no route, as being clear to me, there is no route to citizenship without physical presence in Barbados. It may be a shortened presence now, but it's a presence. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. And I understand the clarity that you have now received, Senator Malalu. But my point still remains, though. You are moving from a position where you have obtained permanent residency in the country without actually being here. And the pathway, remember the pathway is a dual one. The pathway takes you to permanent residency, and then you use that permanent residency to get to citizenship. So when I refer to a pathway, it is that you have an individual who can obtain permanent residence in Barbados without actually having resided here. So that starts the ball rolling. I'm concerned why the minister seems confused by what I have said.
Well, no, because it would mean that the person would have to be here by a worker permit or something to be present in the country to then apply for permanent residence. And everybody who applies for permanent residence does not necessarily have to come by a work permit. I don't know if the immigration officer can clarify. It is not. And I was saying that everybody who applies for permanent residence doesn't have to have a work permit to work here and be living here before they come and apply. I don't know if you could explain. I might be wrong, but we don't want the members of the committee ourselves to be confused.
If I might, so that it's clear that as a member I understand it, there are, as I understand it in Barbados, 3 pathways to permanent residency. You can have a residency by investment, and that has a pathway that leads to permanent residency. You have another pathway, which is through the work permit, which is the traditional way. After you've lived here for a certain number of years, you can apply. And there is also a pathway called the special entry and reside permit. And those three pathways are your pathways to permanent residency under that method. There are other methods now that we will be talking about through by descent and spouse and all those things that are there. But as we had from the previous person who made a presentation, for example, the 12-month welcome stamp has no inherent route to permanent residency as it stands. So we talked about that, as does an extended visitor stay, someone who stays here 150 times for a month at a time. So they spent here 150 months over the year. There is no pathway there. So the three ways, unless I'm wrong, that are coming out of this bill are those three ways. Yes, and then there are other ones. That's the route to permanent residency. Having achieved permanent residency, you must now meet the physical presence test and be vetted and follow through these processes before. That's what we're talking about. So I'm not disagreeing with the gentleman, because that is the part that is shortened, and we can talk about that, but I want to be clear on how you get to that point of permanent residency.
And so that is the point. Sorry, that's the point.
Let's give the presenter the opportunity to clarify, please.
Certainly, and I don't think that Senator Malou, that we're saying different things. We are saying the same thing. If, through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could make some as brief as I can, comments to the presentations by the other committee members, because we seem to be conflating some of the issues, and certainly I wouldn't want the committee to walk away with any misnomers in terms of my presentation. I want to quote the judgment from the Maltese case. The judge in the Maltese case said that the court was concerned, the court's concern was not limited to criminality or insufficient vetting, but rather the judgment reflected a broader concern that nationality should continue to represent meaningful attachment and sustained relationships of trust extended beyond the domestic legal borders. Again, this is a 2025 judgment, Minister Husbands, and I speak directly to you through the chair, because your presentation seems to try to shore up or give assurance that we were concerned about criminals coming in. You even said all rich people are not persona non grata. I assure you, within this space, I am an attorney at law, and I do international criminal law, and we do wealth management. So I understand that there are persons that can give investment to the country that are certainly not criminals. That is not the point. The point is not criminality. You also focus, and I believe it was also mentioned by the Chief Immigration Officer, of the technology that is able to give assurance again that the policy was okay. Again, Minister, technology that is available to Barbados is available across the industrialized world. However, the industrialized world has not shrunken their citizenship requirements just because there's technology. In Canada, you need at least, I believe, it's 3 years. In the United Kingdom, 5 years. And then let's talk about the United States. So the point of giving assurance that somehow we have this technology, and therefore it gives us a green light by which to allow persons to get citizenship in Barbados in 6 months, or get citizenship in Barbados in 9 months of being resident in Barbados, is not the point. The point is that this is a program that when you look at it in its totality to both bills, it represents that there is a heavily weighted investment opponent to obtaining citizenship. And that relationship is what gives us concern. I want to assure you, I believe also yourself and Mr. Malou also pointed out that, and again, Senator Malou said he did not see the nexus between the labor shortages and the bill. Senator Malou, I spent hours combing through the script of the Minister of Home Affairs when he made the second reading. Not the official Hansard, of course, but I was able to comb through the script. And it is, again, I wasn't looking for the reasoning in the bill itself, but certainly when the Minister of Home Affairs presented on the floor of Parliament, his reasoning, clear reasoning for why we needed these bills was because of the workforce and labor challenges, then connected to economic prosperity for Barbados. There was a clear connection and I invite the committee to pull up the script. That is what the minister, that's what the minister said. So when I said that the evidence was not there, I was not looking for the evidence within the bill itself. I listened very carefully and reread more than once the script of the minister to ensure that I understood what was the intent of government and what was the purpose for doing this. And I reiterate, even as I listened to the contributions of the committee members, labor challenges and workforce challenges are here in Barbados. Minister Husbands, you mentioned that, I believe it's Singapore, you said, just as tiny as us, and they have 1 million people. Minister, my question to you is, are you familiar with the concept of population density? In that Barbados has one of the highest population densities in the world. Are we inviting now 1 million people to live on this 166 square miles with all of the social services and all of the economic strain that could come to Barbados? So those are things that have to be balanced in terms of the policy. And what we are seeing today is that this shortened form of citizenship specifically does not actually address the workforce challenges. The workforce challenges do exist and they are complex. And I have demonstrated that there are several countries across the Western world that have employed sector-specific migration policies that have been able to target their labor shortages and target their labor challenges and have increased their economic activity without having to change or drastically reduce citizenship requirements. So I just wanted to make those comments, Minister.
And I just want to clarify for you, because I think it's important for you to understand, if we are going to be able to chart a path for Barbados, it is critical to understand the underlying issues that govern policy. The developed countries are working with a situation where they have concerns about the hundreds of thousands of people who try to get into their country. And that is why they would stick with long pathways, because they are not looking to permanently swell their population. They may want some labor to come in for a period of time until they can sort out getting more people in a particular sector, and therefore will issue work permits for people to come in and work, etc. And then when that permit expires, please leave, because we don't want all of you strangers among us. So that is a different situation. We are dealing with a situation where our population is shrinking and it is already small. It's not big and shrinking. It is very small and shrinking, and therefore your policy must reflect that difference in terms of what it is you are trying to do. Now, you made a point that said the main concern is the role that finance plays in the point system for whether you will be acceptable or not. And yet at the same time you said, you know that people who have money are not necessarily criminal. What is the problem with having the finance as an important part of how we assess whether or not we're going to bring you? I want you to answer that, but just let me finish this because I know the minister wants to move on. Senator Malalu outlined the three bases on which, I don't remember what country it is, but they outlined three things that they use, the Europeans, to deny citizenship and visas and so on, etc. And they were a scale of passport issuance, meaning that they were doing a lot. Then the short processing time, so they're thinking, with all these people, how well are you doing the processing with that short time? And then the fact that of all those people who apply, you have very low rejection rates. Now, each of those are not dealt with on an individual basis to determine to remove a visa. Those will be taken together. It's those together that presents a challenge to you. Barbados is not going that route. Barbados is one, yes, with technology we can have shorter times. However, we are not going to be on a whole scale. Whosoever will just come, or here you got money, come. Barbados is not there. Barbados is looking for quality persons that can actually strengthen our country. And more importantly, eventually when they come to citizenship and they can start to have families and so on, they will help us to resolve the population size problem that we have. That is part of what has to happen. We actually need more living, breathing persons living in our country if we are going to remain viable, if we're going to remain viable as a nation. So that's important. Over to you, sorry.
Let me just bring a little clarity to a few things. There's a report, Population Commission report, that speaks to labor productivity, declining population, speaks to a number of things. And recommendations were made by that commission. It was not a partisan commission. It is a commission that values the nation, its people, and its future generation. And clearly coming out of this Population Commission, I think the report was revised in 2014, and it clearly states that between 1960 and 2011, the population of this country has only increased by 16.5%. In 1960, the size of the population was approximately 230,980 persons. And at the time of the 2010 population and housing census, the population of Barbados was 277,821. So it moved to 277. And by 2021, it has decreased back to 269. So clearly, we have a problem there. And it further went on to identify that the rate of the labor force participation has been declining since 1995. So there's evidence from that Population Commission, and these are not figures that we brought in here. I don't think Senator Waters brought those figures in here. That's a commission, neither did Minister Husbands. So we have a crisis. And it further went on to state, which is glaring at me, when I looked at the report, on page 23 of the report, with continued, revised in 2024, not 2014, sorry. Yes, it's 2024, thank you. Because it's here and I said 2014 because I was looking at something else, thank you. So the Population Commission and the Population Policy Report was revised in 2024. Sorry about that. But what is glaring at me? The whole aspect of Social Security and social protection. And they say that with the population trends, the total expenditure of the National Insurance Fund is expected to exceed the total income each year. And the fund is projected to be depleted between 2034 and 2041. And I said that based on a comment that was made earlier. I think it was Senator Waters, because this is a crisis. And you may not want to say it's a crisis. It's a crisis. This is 2026 and 2024. That's only 8 years. It's a crisis that we're operating in. Hence, that's why these recommendations, though for some persons they may be seen, I don't want to use the word draconian, but they're not draconian. And I'm saying 3 years. Persons talk about the gold standard of 8 years for citizenship. That occurred some years ago. And I heard Minister Husbands and also Minister Springer. We are now in 2026, very close to 2041. Policies that we are speaking of were indeed implemented legislation and bills 30, 40 years ago. This country continues to lead in terms of how we shape the existence of our people for 50 years down the road. And this may not be the only way, because I keep hearing that this is the only thing we are doing with respect to addressing our challenge, but it is not the only thing. The other frontiers we are pushing internationally, energy, several different things. So this is a holistic approach of building out our labor productivity sector. And our population, they're living longer. The Population Commission report is there for everyone to review, to see that our aging population will place a heavy dependency on the National Insurance Scheme. And that's why I don't want to say in a rush, but it is urgent for us to address these issues. I just want to come in there and leave the floor, because we've been here for I think Minister Weir, the opportunity, Mr. Greenidge, let's give Minister Weir the opportunity to speak, and then I'll get back to you, because this is your session, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for being late, but I had another engagement. I regret that I missed a majority of Senator Greenidge's presentation. About Mr. Greenidge's presentation, I got confused because of the two, but never mind. That might very well be a voice of reason. Sir, I fully appreciate the interest being paid in this piece of legislation before us, simply because what it really tells me is that Barbadians are interested in the future of Barbados. And therefore, I'm glad to hear how we are able to look at the legislation and raise our concerns to matters that really and truly will be Barbadian in the end. There are a couple of things, though, that I believe that we can do a little bit better on. The legislation is certainly not about passports per se, and the fact that we want to make the conversation more about passports than about a process that leads us to a future Barbados that the chairman has really so eruditely brought to our attention in terms of the size of our population. The exploitation of our social services, NIS, and all those are matters that I've heard raised time and again. But if we are to pursue this against all of the information that is brought to us and brought to our attention, I believe it still comes down to how we govern. And the hardcore reality of it is that this entire country is looking on for a government that is responsible and one that is up to the times, and one that is prepared to govern even in difficult times. And therefore, I would want to draw a reference to my personal experience in having to deal with the world that went through 9/11, when previously it was almost like anything goes. When you travel, you could put toothpaste in your bag, you can put any kind of liquids, etc. And given what happened at the event of 9/11, the entire world had to go through change. Having gone through that change, we saw the development of a transportation security agency that brought about rampant change across the world, but it also brought a lot of advantages, globally for the way we do things, certainly for the way we handle immigration and the way we handle citizenship, the way we handle people coming to Barbados, have all been changed. And they have been all changed because of that one event. Now, I have every confidence that if application for citizenship through this bill is before the immigration, the final decision will still reside with immigration, with the minister only intervening in cases where the minister is called upon. And I think those are matters of national security that really and truly do not find a place in a conversation like this, because there are certain matters of national security that we don't debate. And that is the reason why a minister will be invited to make a decision, purely because you want to protect the security of the country. Now, if we can all fall in line with what the US did by creating a TSA that has given serious advantage to many global destinations simply because of the rigor of the protocols that were introduced, I think that this puts Barbados in a very good place to be able to manage information that is coming to us and without having to say a lot about national security. A person traveling to Barbados with a criminal record coming from most places is already known to the authorities. So do we need to fear that? I don't think we do in this 21st century construct. A person, therefore, applying for citizenship will equally have the same flag. And therefore, what I glean from the objective of the bill is for Barbados to be able to get the best that may be available simply by way of the structure that is laid before us. It's not a case of any willy-nilly person applying for citizenship in Barbados and getting it, but that there are people who bring value and that there are people who will contribute to our national insurance scheme as well. And we often talk about how it's going to place a burden on the social services. We never speak of the contribution that it will make. And that is why I often believe sometimes that whilst we want to participate, we sometimes bring a sort of a emotive type of narrative that is designed mainly to create fear among people who do not reason these things for themselves. And that, to my mind, defeats the entire integrity of the presentations that come here, because you ought not to want to bring anything that is going to tamper with the comfort of people who will not interrogate these things for themselves, but will rely on us to be able to provide them with the information that they can trust and believe. Now, Mr. Greenidge, I really appreciate your participation, and I honestly appreciate the fact that you are making this presentation such that no one can go away saying that you did not give your best effort in making sure that the country understands where you are coming from. And given the fact that the presentation is covered by the Democratic Labour Party, where the Democratic Labour Party is coming from. But I heard you cite other destinations as well and the rigor that they have in terms of how they process things that are related to immigration. And I would like for you to give your views on how Canada has approached its citizenship legislation, because I'm acutely aware that it takes between 13 and 15 months to process, and you only need 2 years in Canada. So Canada, to my mind, is a first world state. And I do not know why, if they are going to give 13 to 15 months to process an application and you can get citizenship in 2 years. Small Barbados that is struggling with a population, tell me why we should not equally be as aggressive to make sure we address the problem, because we're certainly not going to get it by birth rate. The one thing that we can leave here knowing is that with the best efforts in the world, we're not going to increase this population by birth rate. And the only other option available to us is through migration. We have to go to the policies that reflect the immigration policies that would allow for us to bring people here and give them citizenship, but people of value, people who would add value rather than create a high dependency on our social network services. Therefore, can we just elevate the conversation to what value we can possibly get in terms of contribution to NIS? And I would like for us to go there. What possible value can we get to contribution to NIS? And sir, if you don't mind, you can share your views on the Canadian model and what are your thoughts about it?
Overview. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I address the specific question of Minister Weir, I would like to address the question of Minister Husbands, who asked me specifically, if you know persons who are rich that are not criminals, you asked me what is the problem, and I have to say I am mildly disappointed because I thought I had already articulated the problem, so I'm going to try my best to do so once again. The problem is not that we believe that rich people are inherently criminal. The problem is that you have devised a system that is heavily weighted on financial investment. And while we all in this room, all the committee members and invited guests, agree that it is not a citizenship by investment as is fashioned in other Caribbean countries, I will quote Senator Malu, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, we should probably examine the duck to see if that is the duck that we want to use to address the problems in Barbados. It is a scenario where you have 10 points to gain permanent residency, and 5 of those points are completely associated with your wealth. The other 5 points, and then I didn't make this point earlier, the other 5 points can be gained not by anything significant, simply by your age. Most persons can obtain a first degree. So the point I'm making is that the actual criteria is not targeted. I hear Minister Husbands talking about we want the right people. There is nothing within the schedule, nothing within the bill that suggests that there's any other criteria that makes them the right people. All it says is that you have to have wealth, and the other criteria are quite innocuous. 40 years old, 3 points. A university degree, first degree, another 2 points, and you're home free. That's 10 points that you are now eligible for permanent residency in Barbados. So the notion that there is this criteria where we are out there seeking this unicorn of a person who is going to flood Barbados with investment and bring their family, Minister Husbands, I have to say I do not see it in the bill that it is drafted. And it brings me to this point. If that is the intention of the policy, then that is what we should do. And I would dovetail that then to answer Minister Weir's question. Canada does have processing time of, yes, within 2 years, but the criteria is 3 years of residency in Canada. And you may have not been in the chamber at the time when I made the presentation. One of the key case studies was, in fact, the PNP program in Canada, where they had significant labor challenges within the economy. And I pointed the committee, and again, I'm willing to give the citation for the OECD's report and other scholarly reviews of the PNP program in Canada, where migrant contribution, where migrant labor within Canada moved from 7% to 35%. And therefore, I'm saying there were measurable criteria by which we could see that a targeted migration program was able to significantly impact the economic viability of the country. So I repeat, if the economic viability of Barbados, with respect to its tax base, with respect to its NIS contributions, is what we are trying to achieve in order to shore up, yes, the national insurance scheme for us and our children in years to come, then the government, in my opinion, has not substantiated why it needs citizenship in 9 months. What it needs is a systematic review first. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have seen the report that you referred to and I have reviewed it. So there's no argument that there is, you may say, a crisis, but certainly there is a problem that we need to address. And there needs then to be a systematic review of that report with targeted recommendations for solid immigration and migration policy that is able to address the economic concerns within that report. I have clients that, I know of a client who brought an analyst into Barbados from Morocco. That analyst remained in Barbados for 3 years, contributed to NIS, paid their taxes. So targeted, so similarly in Canada, you have targeted migration policy. You have in New Zealand where employers are able to report into a system and say, listen, this is where our deficiency lies. So if the deficiencies are specifically in immigration or in hospitality or in IT, wherever the deficiency lies in Barbados, we can have a system where the employers and the reporting can give those statistics and the policy can be targeted towards those needs to shore up the economic viability of Barbados. The problem and the risk, however, and I don't think anyone here can deny that, and this is not something that we're just pulling out of thin air. Senator Malalou referred to the report from the European Union. Yes, it is not that the industrialized countries are saying, oh, they're bringing criminals or whatever. I understand the criteria, but we must be cognizant that these are criteria and these are countries that are looking at our immigration systems, that are looking at what we are doing in these countries and are making assessments as to whether they can trust what we're doing in Barbados. And it does not necessarily have anything to do with vetting. It is the regime of itself. I quoted from the European Union. The judge said it was not specifically to criminality or vetting. I appreciate and I thank you, certainly, Minister Weir, for your admonition of us paying attention to this. I think it is far from a partisan issue. It is an issue that affects all Barbadians. I, as a practitioner, I travel all over the world. I have my son is in university within the world, and our ability to access education, access opportunity, and access investment across the world is critical to our ability to move with our passport. So I thank you, Chairman, for your indulgence in having me here, and I pray that the committee will take some of the recommendations, even if you are not a decision-making body. There is literature out there. The OECD report is there, 200 and something pages on the Canadian program. There's literature out there on the New Zealand program, on the Australian program, to show that there are ways and there are policy prescriptions by which you can achieve what you need to achieve without having to reduce the time for citizenship in Barbados. I thank you, sir.
Let's wrap up. Minister Weir wants the floor for one final comment, please. Be short, Minister Weir. We have extended time. We have given Mr. Greenidge a lot of latitude this morning in his presentation, and that's how we do business. So just be short.
Chair, thank you, and I will definitely be very short. Just to say that what Mr. Greenidge has essentially done is reinforce the point that we've made in the legislation, that you determine a time frame, and we've determined that it's 2 years. We have on record that the Canadians have determined a time frame that suited their situation, and we equally as a country have determined a time frame that suits our situation. And I get the impression that he's on all fours in terms of determining a time frame that is suitable. The truth is that whilst we may have open and free conversation and debate on it, you still have to settle down and govern. And that is the fundamental point that I'm making. And therefore, just as Canada can have a 2 years time frame to address their situation, Barbados is determined that we have a 2 year time frame as well. And I don't think that we've done anything out of the ordinary by so doing. I also wish to reinforce the point, because this point should not escape any of us in this room or those who are following online. We will never be able to address this matter by way of birth rate. It can only be through managed migration.
Thank you, Minister Ware. Let me thank you, Mr. Greenidge, for your presence and your willingness to share your perspectives and your experiences and recommendations. They are indeed deeply valued. I want to thank you. We're going to have,
Sorry,
Minister,
before you go.
we're going to have discussion after. We're going to have discussion on the matter after.
Okay.
So, that's fine. Okay, let's take that was a lot to endorse. Let's take a 15-minute break and return. Who's next? Mrs. Gildenborn and Miss Felicia Dujon. Let's take a 15-minute break. We're gonna discuss that. The session is now resumed, and we will hear from Mrs. Amoy, Mrs. Amoy Gildenborn, and Ms. Felicia Duja. Of course, I get it from them. Good afternoon, ladies, members of the committee. We have resumed. The Joint Select Committee is now in session again. Let me, on behalf of the Joint Select Committee, extend a warm welcome and sincere appreciation to Mrs. Amoy Gildenborn and Ms. Felicia Dujon, who took time out to review these two bills, Immigration and Citizenship Bill, to participate in this process. Your presence and your willingness is deeply valued. We have a 10-minute period where you will present to the committee and other members, and thereafter we'll have a discussion. So let's proceed, and over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today. Now, Barbados has always welcomed CARICOM members into the country. We have done so in a way that is consistent with our social and economic capacities. However, the impetus under which these two pieces of legislation are being brought before us is that we have an aging population, we have a shrinking tax-paying base, and we have a demographic crisis, to use words of the former Home Affairs Minister. Now, while it is agreed that we must modernize Barbados' archaic laws and introduce a merit-based system and use managed migration to save our economy, fund our pensions, protect our social services, there are concerns. It appears that government has taken a policy decision to use immigration as a demographic tool, and the fear is not without totally doing their comprehensive due diligence checks, but the fear is without consideration for Barbados's capacity. Barbados's capacity socially, economically. The fear is that we will not be able to manage the increase in migrants across our borders within the medium term. The policy shift of this nature, I see Mr. Weir laughing, the policy shift of this nature is profound, it's a tightrope, and I am glad that the committee has asked the public for our suggestions and questions and for our input. And that is why we are here. Indeed, it has brought out citizens in Bridgetown, and it has brought my colleague and I here today. Now, I've been listening while the presentations have been made, and our concern on the gold standard debate with respect to the shrinking of the timeline within which naturalization can be granted. 2 years CARICOM and 3 years for non-CARICOM members. Now, myself as an attorney at law, Ms. Dujon as a human rights advocate, indeed the Barbados Bar Association has also made some concerns regarding the contracting of the 2-year timeline period. Now, yes, I do understand and I do agree with the Barbados Bar Association's position, but the concern for us here today is that by doing so, you are also compressing the timeline within which thorough background checks can be made, whether criminal, financial background checks. So it is that in a rush to boost our population numbers, we are weakening the thoroughness of our national security checks. In addition to shortening the timeline up to 2 years, it was mentioned before, and I think it is worthy mentioning it again, with respect to the sweeping powers of the minister. While I do understand, as one of your colleagues mentioned just now, there are some things that cannot be challenged. However, this in itself is a security breach, or a security concern, let's say. When you have a minister with such sweeping powers who can make policy decisions based on his opinion, and those decisions cannot be challenged, that is a concern the Bar Association raised, and I'm raising it, my colleagues were raising it again today. So questions can be asked, and indeed we are asking these questions so that solutions can then be made, or amendments. What is the fail-safe for corrupt practices? I don't want to say corrupt ministers, but what is the fail-safe that we have for corrupt practices that may...
Can I interject here, please?
I'm not saying ministers.
We've been going along very, very good this morning.
I'm saying corrupt practices, sir.
Bring any type of pun into this meeting.
We're not using any puns, sir.
Because this is being streamed, and of course, you will have a record of what is said here.
Of course.
Let's be very transparent and let's be straight with this here. We have operated thus far. I have seen an extension of the Democratic Labour Party this morning. We had a very, very good discussion without any.
Mr. Sutherland?
Let me speak. I'm the chairman. Can I speak? Please turn off your mic. Thank you very much. Let's carry on as human beings.
Yes, Chair. I am saying corrupt practices and procedures. I was just making it clear that I was not referring to ministers, right? What are the legal safeguards? What are the specific vetting processes that will replace the human investigative element, which will be necessary? Will citizens granted or persons granted citizenship in 2 or 3 years, will that be conditional? Will it be limited until full background checks are complete? Will we have a rollout phase? How will the law protect our national security? How will it prevent identity theft or financial crime? These are questions that average Barbadians have, and indeed, my colleagues. With respect to the labor force and market competition, particularly for our youth, public feedback reveals that there is, and I mean no disrespect, Chairman, that there is a slight disconnect between government's goals and grassroots realities. Widespread fear is that local workers are being bypassed as employers look for cheaper, more compliant foreign labor. Furthermore, while the bill aims to import talent, our ambitious young persons are leaving our borders. or they are being asked to look elsewhere for employment. Concerns young people have include the high cost of living, and that's not just young people, that's Barbadians across the board, low wages, and the suffocating stages within which persons have to go through in order to start a small business, open a bank account. So it is being respectfully suggested that government first fix the structural and bureaucratic issues causing our own people to leave the country. So questions can be asked. How will the government policy prevent employers from preferring cheaper foreign labor over Barbadians? Will there be a mandatory hire requirement or subsidies or incentives for hiring Barbadians? How will government measure and report on the impact of these new immigrants on youth employment? These are some of the questions that Barbadians have. With respect to our straining infrastructure and national identity, briefly, there is a tangible strain on our island's infrastructure. And preservation of our national identity, I think, we need to put in the forefront as well. Questions are asked, will an influx of migrants break our already struggling social services? Now, I know, and I am full aware that all of us know in here, Barbados is only 166 square miles, and a smile wide, some people will say. But we are a highly in-debt, middle-income developing country. And it is well established, now I'm not an economist, but it is well established that population growth reduces per capita income because it puts pressure on limited resources, wages fall as more workers compete, and fruit prices rise, lowering living standards. The concern is that unchecked population growth will undermine economic progress where there are resource constraints. And that is Barbados' reality. Barbados does not have the resources and infrastructural capacity that is required to successfully manage opening our borders, to effect a rapid influx of migration or migrants to reside and work, whether CARICOM or non-CARICOM nationals. The government is already struggling to provide social services with respect to health care. We have seen our issues at QEH with respect to education at all levels, with respect to housing, water resources, energy, transport, and the police seem to be overwhelmed with the crime. We have backlog of cases in the courts, and the prison has seen better days. But beyond the bricks and mortar, there seems to be an identity gray area bureau. Barbados are asking the question, who is a Bajan? As we open up regional pathways, is it now inevitable that some of us, true Barbadians, will be marginalized? We're asking a question. Is the legislation essentially opening a back door for persons who may have only recently become CARICOM citizens, members, to become Barbadian citizens? How will Barbadians or Barbados, specifically the government, and us too, because it's not the government alone, how will we protect our Barbadian identity? How will our Bajan identity and civic participation be preserved? Through language, civic education, residency tests? What capacity assessments have been done for our Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the Barbados Water Authority, transport, education, even the prison. How exactly will the additional income that we make, the country that is, through this policy, how will that be ring-fenced for social services? And one question that I ask is, will we have any restraints on or limitations on foreign ownership of land? And how will the government police that? Now, another point of concern is with respect to, and Mr. Thompson spoke about it this morning, and I was very grateful listening to his presentation with respect to the welcome stampers, because that's something that I mentioned as well too. Now, I did hear Senator Husbands respond to a lot of the things that Mr. Thompson had mentioned, so I am grateful for the guidance with respect to where you stand. And I agree with Mr. Thompson's submission. Not having the welcome stampers or a pathway for them, I think, was an oversight. And I hope that government does look at it again to see how we can fully integrate these persons or give them a pathway as well too. With respect to enforcement and employer accountability, we're talking about the capacity for the state to enforce what it's saying. Like, you're going to put it on paper, but what teeth are you using to bite with it? Because when we are speaking about the remote workers especially, I mean, they have already proven that they have their own jobs and they can seamlessly integrate into our communities without draining our resources, so to speak. And to have a frictionless or seamless program, one that we have seen has worked in the past, we should really think about having that tailored within the legislations that we are talking about now. Other than that, with respect to certain labor advocates who have voiced their opinions and they are worried about employer accountability, as I am, because while the bill introduces guest worker regulations and employer penalties, well, history has shown that bad actors frequently exploit more, I don't want to say cheaper labor, but that's exactly what it is, cheaper labor, and standards drop. So one of the things that we are concerned about is that if we are already having some concerns or struggles in the immigration with respect to our bog down of our administration and bureaucratic friction, how can the public then trust the immigration department to monitor corporate compliance? I see the immigration chief there smiling at me. I hope it's something that I said that you agreed with, or you have an answer to. You don't have an answer to it? Oh, you have an answer to it? Okay.
Just to interrupt on a matter of time, you've gone close to 20 minutes, so just over. So
coming along the line, we'll wrap up shortly.
We have extended, we've given you a little latitude.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Don't overdo it.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We have one more point to make, but I was on the immigration chief there just now. I wanted to know what concrete staffing, our timelines, our commitments that we have that will assist with respect to employer compliance. How will inspections, like whistleblower protections and remedies for exploited workers be implemented? What anti-fraud or audit mechanisms will prevent misuse of the point system for employers or agents. Now, the last point that we are going to make, and my colleague is going to make it, is with respect to the gender responsive and anti-trafficking protections, which we think that the bill could do with a little bit of not long.
We didn't know that you had an extension to the presentation. I thought that when we tell you wrap up, it's 20 minutes. Sorry, committee members, what are we going to do? Are you open? Mr. Walters, Mr. Senator Walters, Senator Malalu, ministers?
Certainly Senator Walters wouldn't mind.
Turn off your mic a minute. Let the committee members decide how we move forward. Yeah. We've gone 20 minutes and there's still, I just want to know if we should, the leverage that we've given to
Mr. Chair, I thank you for the question. I just wanted to remind us we must be respectful for all those persons who've asked to present today, and we don't have unlimited time today. So perhaps it could wrap it up in the next minute, and that would be enough for me.
Senator Walters?
I think we can give them the opportunity to do that one final point.
We're fine. Okay. Proceed, but keep it very tight because we've really gone over time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you and good afternoon. My short and brief presentation primarily looks into the gender responsive and anti-trafficking policies that can be implemented in both bills. Initially, when we think about immigration laws and policies, we tend to forget that we're actually dealing with the human element. And I think these are the kinds of areas that we need to pay a little attention to. Primarily, one of the things that we want to look at, immigration legislation should ensure that workers can report abuse without losing legal status. Victims of domestic violence as well as trafficking, that victims are not criminalized for leaving any situation of employment which is abusive or spousal development. An independent monitoring of employers that ought to be strengthened. In addition, spousal and dependent residency provisions ensure that immigration arrangements cannot be used as instruments of coercion or control within abusive relationships. Consider mechanisms allowing victims of domestic violence, trafficking, and severe abuse to maintain temporary lawful status while seeking protection and support services. We are aware that there is an Anti-Trafficking Act 2016, but however, what we would like to see is that both bills identify trafficking and trafficking of persons. In addition, we want to look at in terms of having clear regulation guidance where it deals with gender-specific immigration policies, child protection measures for migrant children and unaccompanied minors, confidentiality protection for victims, access to legal, medical, and social support services, coordination between immigration authorities, law enforcement agencies, social services, and anti-trafficking bodies. In addition, I think we had a discussion in terms of the role of the minister. We are recommending an independent immigration review and advisory committee that will deal with matters where they may have, I would say, contradicting mechanisms within their processes of applications. I believe, and I believe most of us have said that having a minister with discretionary powers, it's kind of a little dangerous in some cases, and I believe a committee, an advisory committee can oversee that, and that committee can comprise with representations from immigration, legal profession, civil society. Most importantly, civil society is very important in terms of working with immigration policies, in terms of trafficking and anti-trafficking policies. So I hope I stayed between that. I can send a report to facilitate that as well. But I believe what the bill is actually missing is the gender response to immigration laws and policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That concludes our submission before you this evening.
Thank you very much. And like I said in my preamble when you came in, I want to thank you for taking time out to share with us your lived experience, your professional status as it relates to human rights and everything that we will factor into this bill. I don't know if I can give you answers today. That's not my role. But I will let the committee members discuss your presentation over the next half an hour, and we can feed comments and questions from you as well to the responses. That's how we do it. So I'm going to open the floor. I know probably Senator Waters might have been privy to this presentation, and you may want to say something. Senator Malalu, ministers, the floor is open. And also immigration and CPC. Feel free to. Senator, you wanted to start? Senator Waters? It's because you have a time. Yeah. Go ahead.
Margaret Ennis, Chief Immigration Officer. It was really great hearing some of your concerns, and just so that you know, most of the things that you're asking for, we already have in place. The Child Care Board, the Immigration Department, we work closely with them already. The Labor Department, Anti-Fraud Squad, all of these things are already things that are in train and that we do on a regular basis. Human trafficking, tomorrow we're having a session where our officers, and it's ongoing training for our officers. So most of the things that you're talking about are things.
Chief, just bring the mic closer so you can.
I'm sorry.
You can.
Most of the things that you're asking for are things that are already in place with the Immigration Department. Over the years, we've evolved and have built out relationships with the social services as it relates to police and the anti-fraud squad. These are things that are already done. Every agency has a role and responsibility, and there's actually a map in terms of human trafficking. First respondents, second, third, what happens along those lines. So those are things that are already in place. I noted that you did mention background checks after 3 years, but our background checks are done before you're granted status. So that's done before and not after necessarily. Yeah, you did. I wrote it down. Our checks are rigorous checks. We work with other security agencies to ensure. Right now we do something like pre-checks before you actually get here, so that we know beforehand a bit of who you are before you enter our waters, so to speak.
I just want to clarify. If I did say that, I was speaking about background checks before they get here. So we know who's coming, what you did, your financial history, your criminal history, medical history, if that's necessary. But so if that is what I said and that is what you understood, let me make that correction. So what I wanted to know is where are these mechanisms? I hear you talking about the different agencies we have, but understood.
Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to let you know that as it relates to immigration, we're safe. We've developed security systems and checks with other agencies. So we have something called Advanced Passenger Information. It's a system. And we know, generally speaking, who's coming before you get here so that we can put things in place to safeguard our borders. There's a bit of legislation that we are looking at, and that's the passenger name record. So the legislation is helping us really and truly to get better at what we do. But I can assure you that there are checks and balances in place before persons get here.
Thank you for that information. And I just want to make reference again to the Anti-Trafficking Act 2016. The concern has been that the act primarily deals with the criminal matter, meaning that when somebody is caught in the act of trafficking. But what are the mechanisms? Because neither bill does not touch on trafficking. It does not make any reference to anti-trafficking policies. It works in isolation, which is given, and it specifically deals from the perspective of the immigration officers, their first of contact. What we are recommending that parts or clauses of anti-trafficking be included so that it gives immigration officers first in contact as to how to identify it. And you have already identified that they're doing the training and all of that. That is important for them. But with this act, it does not make reference to it. And I think it does not eliminate the bill, the anti-trafficking bill in any way. But it is important that these matters are dealt with as firsthand, because immigration officers are usually the first of contact, are able to identify those matters, not having to make reference to the trafficking act, anti-trafficking act in itself. So that's one part. The other part that I think I wanted to ask deals with domestic abuse, where a spouse, if you doing in terms of the spousal dependency sponsorship, what happens to persons that are in the situation? Do they have the responsibility to report it? And if they do report it, how is it dealt with in cases of domestic violence? Is the application withdrawn? What are I think this is the kind of questions that I'd want to...
Okay, so I work in immigration and not police. And there are certain matters that are referred to police, like domestic violence, which is really and truly, it does not come under our purview. So perhaps that's a question that can best be served by another player, but immigration.
I just want to ask again, so I'm just giving a scenario if in case you have someone who has applied for citizenship and they are in a very dangerous situation and that person reports it to immigration officer, what is the next stage in such cases? What do? Do they go to the police? Because remember, the application is still with immigration. Will they have to withdraw the application? Would they have an intervention? I think what we're trying to do is to provide protection for victims, and our policies must be gender sensitive to recognize those matters. So referring it to the police also takes the victims to other places, and I think everything needs to be centralized in such a way that, and it's not with the immigration, it's just that we want to ensure that all of our victims are protected by all means and all the capacities and mechanisms we have.
I hear you, yes, and noted.
Minister Husbands wanted to make a point. She wants to make a point. And also CPC, if you want to come in. Chief Parliamentary Counsel. No, I was saying if you want to come in, you feel free to come in. Yeah.
Sorry, sir. I was just listening to the presentations, and in my mind, I'm saying we have a body of legislation here in Barbados. If one piece of legislation does not adequately address it, there is some other piece of legislation that fills the void. You made mention about labor. The Labor Department legislation would be triggered there. So I am thinking that our cadre of legislation and our personnel within the government service would be able to address the needs of any person who finds himself in a vulnerable situation. I don't think the immigration or the citizenship bill is the only piece of legislation that we should be burdening with all of those responsibilities.
Minister Husbands.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to see the ladies coming and sharing and so on. Engagement is so very important. Just to set your mind at rest, if you go to the bill, you will see that at page 51, 50 and 51, they have a list of the persons who are prohibited. And one of the mentions there are people who are engaged in trafficking and abusing minors and so on. And therefore, it has not neglected to say who cannot enter, along with drugs and all of the other things. There was one part of the presentation made that I just wanted to comment on because I don't think we got a chance to deal with it in the previous submissions. The issue of the capacity of the social and economic services. And what I understand is that people are saying we are already challenged with providing for what we have. If we bring in a whole lot of people, how are we going to provide safely for more people when we're having challenges at the moment? The answer to that is like the issue of the chicken and the egg. If we were to bump up all of our services to accommodate another 200,000 people at present where we are, you would have to burden the current population with higher taxes to make it happen, both people and enterprises. The strategy for being able to accommodate and serve more people is to actually increase your population over time, in which you are blending people being able to get work, people being able to pay NIS, people being able to pay taxes, people coming in and wanting homes, etc. And so they're spending in the economy. Because they're spending in the economy, the tax revenues will rise, and you can then increase your services as you go along. So it's something that goes on hand in hand. You're folding it in bit by bit, and this is why you have to take a strategic approach to it. You're not going to get there without increasing your population, to increase your economic activity, to increase your government revenues, that you can provide more and more services. And the last thing, we started talking about Singapore. And Singapore is 270 square miles. Barbados is 166. Singapore has 6 million persons. We have 269,000. And what they did back in 1824, Singapore only had 11,000 people. And they had to sit down and work through, how are we going to grow our economy? And they recognize you cannot grow it with small numbers. You need numbers in order to generate the economic activity and to consume the economic activity. And so they went on a planned migration program of bringing in people into their economy to deliberately allow them to build out the various sectors that they had targeted for growth. And so they were able, by 1947, they were able to go to 1 million persons because they used a managed migration policy. This is what Barbados is seeking to do. You asked the question about how will it crowd out your domestic labor and competition. And that is a genuine problem that people discuss and have concerns about. The strategy has to be, Barbadians are not going to work for pennies an hour. They will not, and they cannot live on that. What Barbados has to do is to raise the productivity and skill levels of its population so that that worker is valuable to the employer because of the level of skill that they bring and the quality of their output. This is what will safeguard jobs. What will happen then is that you will have, and Singapore had that problem, they had employment, but they didn't have enough people. So their domestic people were employed, and then the foreigners then filled in where the gaps are. Now, everybody did not come in as a citizen. They would come in as a migrant worker. So you would have a 2-year work permit or a 3-year work permit or whatever was the case, so that they could keep balancing and rebalancing what it was they were doing and accept only the numbers and qualities that they needed to make them permanent citizens of their country. So it is that kind of strategy and managed migration approach that has to be used if we're going to make this work. But what is not an option is to do nothing. And what is not an option is to do something too slowly while you have a situation that is deteriorating before your eyes. We simply do not have enough working population to carry our seniors. We can't change that overnight. We have to do something. But we will take care of the challenges that you have identified and do our best to deal with each one of those things. This is part of the strategy. It's not something that we haven't thought about. We have thought about it, and we are putting in place things that we need to try to manage and deal with it. And we're trusting that in another 3-4 years, when you come back to assess it, I'm hopeful that we would have a very positive report to give you.
Minister Springer.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to respond briefly to some of the points that were raised by the presenter. And one thing in particular that she would have mentioned, where the question was put, if we were preserving our national identity and others, protecting other social services, I think the concern as it relates to social services was addressed by Minister Husbands. But I would want to speak to national identity. In listening to the presentation, I was reminded of a theory in the tradition of critical social theory that speaks to hegemonic discourse and the idea that dominant groups will come into a society and would influence the behavior, the culture of that society, and that is a real concern. But in this particular case, I wonder if it's a real concern in the sense that we've had interference from other cultures from time immemorial. In fact, if you look at the Barbadian identity, it would have been impacted by a number of historical events that would have happened over the centuries, and some of those things we want to forget. There's some of these things as aspects of our national identity, of our history, that we would want to forget, and we would have had events over the years that would have impacted the narrative as it relates to the Barbadian national identity. Certainly, dating back from the slave trade, the independence, back when we became a republic, all of these things are now part of the narrative. Culturally, we've had interference from the North, whether it be Northern Caribbean, Jamaica, North America. In fact, the influence of music, dance, all such like has been so impactful over the years that in many cases, those music forms, those cultural forms are far more dominant than our local cultural expressions in some aspects. But that has in no way injured our national identity, because national identity is not meant to be stagnant, cannot be stagnant, cannot be fixed. It has to be fueled, it's often always in flux. There's always change. There's little change. There are things that we would want to adapt from other nations, from other groups. We would want the German efficiency. There are things, there are good things, there are bad things. We have to determine as a people what we will keep and what we will discard. And I think that is the main question, not to be afraid that persons will come in and try to change who we are. They can't change who we are. We're Bajans. And whether 100 persons come here or 1,000, or 10,000 will still be Bajans. They may become Bajans, but they're not going to change who we are, because our national identity is part of our lived experience. What we've been through as a Barbadian people, as a Bajan people, that's not going to change. So that's not a fear that I would want to put out there, or even a real concern. Yes, there'll be changes. Of course there'll be changes. There has to be changes. But I don't think there's any threat to what we collectively refer to as the Bajan or as our Barbadian national identity. I just wanted to make that point in response to your concerns. Yes?
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Springer. But if I may add, when we create legislation, it's not usually for maybe not in our lifetime. It could be decades, centuries later. And I think it's relevant that we do speak about preserving our identity by whatever means, whether we do it for this generation or the next generation. And to say that would also mean that we almost preempt that our identity or our culture might not be diluted by any other culture. And I think it's wrong and erroneous to say that. Given what we've seen, what our global economies look like in today's age, I think it's important and relevant to ensure that we do whatever that is necessary to preserve whatever culture, whatever little that we have that makes us Barbadian, if I can openly say that. Also, we do not have the data. I think you're saying that, but you don't have any supporting data to say that our culture will be preserved within the next decades or centuries. I think it's important, and I think it's relevant, and I think what we keep forgetting is the human element. Regardless of what legislation that we pass, we always have to remember that when you have immigration policies, whatever legislation that you're trying to pass, people will interact, and sometimes your culture may be hegemonic, what may be perhaps identical to other societies or to other cultures or to even to the younger generation. Perhaps the younger generation that's coming may not like what we have right now. So I think it's important to identify that. If we're looking at immigration, we have to look at the impact that it will have within our societies and how best we can preserve it and not dismiss it as if, well, we don't have to worry about it because in the next 5 years we will have the same culture. We cannot predict that. We cannot predict the influences of other cultures on our culture. So I want to make that claim and keep preserving, and it's our human fundamental right. UNESCO tells us that we have the right to preserve our culture, and we have to do it. If it means that we do it through various forms of legislation, we should continue to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Gillenborn and Ms. Dujon, for taking your time out to present on this very important matter, both immigration and citizens' bill. Like I said, we following your presentations, and I guess you will send a written submission of what you presented today. Certainly your comments, your presentation will be taken into consideration as we dive deeper into this bill to make it fit for purpose legislation for our citizens, for our community, and for future generations. So I thank you once again.
Thank you all for having us.
Okay, we've had a relatively long morning, long day. We still have 3 presentations to do. Is it the will of the committee to break for lunch at this stage? Because I know we've been here. It's 2 o'clock, and I think we've gone on for a long period. I think we need to have something so we can feed our brains as well. So I would say we break for lunch for how long? I'm guided. I'm guided. I didn't hear you, Senator. Okay, we'll break for 50 minutes. That's good.
5-0?
Yeah, and our 50 to 1 hour give persons enough time to have a meal. So this meeting is adjourned, sorry, suspended, sorry, until 3:05. Thank you.
No. One, 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 two, one, 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 two. I said camera three, camera three, camera three, camera three.